InfoTecarios Podcast, el mundo de la información en constante evolución.
InfoTecarios Podcast International. Welcome to another episode of our podcast, Your Informational Therapy This Weekend. I am Juan Machin, your friend Juan Tífico, and it's a pleasure to say hi to all of you and welcome to our podcast. We have, from our crazy guys of the podcast, we have Santiago Villegas. Hello, Santiago. How are you doing?
Hello, Juan. I think it's my first InfoTecarios podcast in English. I don't remember, but it's quite different to say hello in English than say hello in Spanish in Latin American audience with our Latin American audience. So yes, we are here. I'm just arriving in Medellin in my new home. I'm very glad to be with the people that make this very, very profound and deep work on information science and librarianship encyclopedia. I remember that you've been working with that one for about 1 year or maybe a little more. So it's a honor to be here with a very special guest here. Do you think that we maybe have for the first time somebody in Africa? It's our first time, or
I
we
think it's our
already did?
first. Yes.
Okay, it's a first. So Stephen, you are our first guest from Africa, and we want to know about you and what you do. So let's introduce yourself to our audience, and thanks to be here.
Thank you, Juan and Santiago. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Stephen Akintunde. One of the editors in the newly released Encyclopedia of Libraries, Librarianship and Information Science. I worked as a librarian at the University of Jos in Nigeria, one of the public universities, conventional university with courses across 15 faculties, including medicine, natural sciences, environmental sciences, arts, law, social sciences, and management sciences, pharmaceutical sciences, veterinary medicine. So that was the university I worked as the university librarian. I've also been the chairman of Nigerian University Libraries Consortium for several years. I had worked as chairman of the State Library Association and also been a resource person for the regulatory body for the Library Association in Nigeria. I worked as a lecturer at the Library and Information Science program at the University of Jos. I also taught sociology in the sociology department. My PhD is in sociology of professions. Now, I studied, interestingly, sociology for my first degree, sociology and anthropology. I also have a master's in sociology and a PhD in sociology. I have a diploma in librarianship, postgraduate certificate in information management, and a master's in information and library studies from Aberystwyth University in the United Kingdom. So that is briefly me. I had also served as a resource person at the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa in the Committee on Development Information. especially the knowledge, library, and information services section. Those are briefly myself, so to say, and I'm so glad to be part of this conversation. I know Kwan, we met in the process of working on the encyclopedia of libraries, librarianship, and information science. He's been a wonderful guy who is so proactive. And the team we work together has been quite a dynamic team under the leadership of David Baker and Lucy Ellis, for whom I've also had the privilege of writing some chapters in some of the series that they've produced through Elsevier. I hope this is sufficient introduction to start off.
That's a lot. You make a lot of things, Stephen. So I have to say that when I hear your introduction, it's like hear what Juan do in their daily life. You're people with a lot of work, doing a lot of research, and I have to say, Nigeria was one of the countries that I was when I was working with the Gates Foundation. In fact, this shirt is from Nigeria. That's why I wear it here today. It's hand paint, and I was in Abuja and Lagos. We were working with public libraries there, with digital transformation in public libraries there. It was around 10 years ago, but I think that Nigeria is one of the most beautiful countries that I ever been. So yes, it's an honor to have you here. And Juan, information, society, libraries, that's a whole world. So where we begin?
Well, perhaps to ask our special guest, how was it like to start working on the encyclopedia? What's your story with it? And I think your academic background shows when you take a look at the table of contents of your section, right? But let's hear from Stephen. How was it like to start working on it?
Yeah, thank you very much, Kwan. Um, Working on the encyclopedia of libraries, librarianship, and information science was quite a challenge. A challenge in the sense that let's see if you can do it. And it became a major reference work. And because of that, we needed to navigate, okay, so how do we go about it? One of the first challenges was, okay, how do you even identify the authors? And how do you know who the experts are in this field? How do the topics seem together? I was asked to edit the section on libraries, information, and society, like one said, which is along the way of my academic background in sociology and information science. So it was quite tasking, I must say. You had to think that how do we really get this thing to work? But I just believed, like others, because we drew motivation from each other, that yes, we can do it. And the leadership we had of David Baker and Lucy Ellis helped us, they were the general editors. So we met from time to time to think out the gray areas. And I must commend Kwan. Like I mentioned earlier, he was quite proactive. He made some suggestions that helped us in identifying the authors, and it to be able to contact the authors and get them to commit to writing was one stage. Now, for the authors to commit, and then when you thought everything was okay, suddenly you now hear, oh, sorry, I cannot do this. There was a particular author after some time now said, well, the university ethical consideration will not allow them to continue to contribute. And that was a major blow, but you have to absorb it. You have to still look for another author to replace. Some will lay off, but it was quite interesting, I must say, at the end, to be able to cover the several areas and get the people involved. Some of the authors will ask, okay, so what is the need for me? What benefit do I gain apart from indexing and all that? You just try to convince them. So it was quite interesting at the end. More interesting because we kept meeting as a team, exchanging our ideas. So we got to know that, oh, so this other editor is facing this challenge, this other, and that really made the work easy. Yeah.
I don't particularly like meetings, but these meetings were very good and with very good colleagues. I think these were key to success. In a previous episode, we had Diane Brooksworth, who also worked as a section editor, but the difference with Diane's section was that she took the reins from another colleague. So the section was already developed when she came into to the team. But in your section, you were one of us who were there from the beginning. So you had some liberty to develop the first draft of the section. I would like to ask you, um, how did you? What was the process of developing it further? Which were the topics that you were most interested to put forward, to add, or which ones you subtract from the original proposal? How did you do that?
Thank you very much. For the development of the section, like I mentioned, the section is titled Libraries, Information and Society. So the focus is on the originators and consumers of information. And that also means whatever gadgets we are using to package information needed to be addressed. And in that process, it became obvious that it would be of interest to be able to know, okay, the dynamics of the target audience. In other words, the various communities that will make use of the encyclopedia. And therefore, you needed to consider, okay, who are the end users of information? What is their diversity? So we looked at the different communities, gender. You looked at the content. You looked at the data, like big data, with the dynamics in information. Is important for us to also look at literacies. Okay, what type of literacies are we dealing with, and are we likely to deal with in the near future? And I must commend again Kwan, who wrote on literacies of the future. Now we are dealing with algorithms, we are dealing with numerical literacy, and all sorts of literacies are coming up because of the dynamics. Then the future for medical practice and how in Africa in particular, in terms of regional librarianship, we had topics from the Caribbean, English-speaking Caribbean, and in Africa. And that of Africa is quite of interest because we now discover that actually the earliest library known is from Africa. And we've also discovered that there is a focus, advocacy on decolonization, indigenous knowledge. And why is this? Because there is a new awakening that there had been libraries presence in Africa before the colonial era, but the colonial era seemed to have overshadowed what had been there before. And what we are now professing is more Western oriented. So there's a lot of literature coming up in Africa saying that no, there has to be a focus on indigenous knowledge, decolonization, and all that. But again, the essence is okay, how does this fit in our library school curriculum? So those are some of the concerns in constructing the section on libraries, information, and society. First of all, to focus on the originator of information, the beneficiary, the tools. So you are also talking about artificial intelligence, the history of artificial intelligence and how it is taking over the space. Now, we needed to look at all that, the use of big data, copyright, governance. All these have to do with the users of information, freedom of information, access to information. You know, it has to do with the people. It has to do with knowledge. It has to do with data. And that's why that section is quite of interest. I enjoyed the contribution because you are dealing with the information, you are dealing with the society of users. And what are the constraints? What was the context? Like Sirat means, we say, what is the definition of the situation? Sociologically, you call it, what is the definition of this situation? So the definition of the situation of the users of knowledge will have to be their access. What is responsible for their access? Is it because copyright rules or regulations? Do they have true freedom of access to information? Now, this freedom of information bill, how widely is it applicable? How does it impact censorship? How does it affect the stock of libraries? And how are libraries reacting to this? All these are what we were looking at in the section that has to do with information, libraries, and society.
That's a lot, Juan. If I say again, I can say it again. If you are a lot of topics in common, Juan and Stephen. One of those is information literacy. We just talk about a recent, paper that Juan published around history of information literacy, focus on Latin America. But I think I have to make a question about this particular topic on information literacy, because we've been doing this for decades. How is the perspective on a diverse world like the world we are, we have very different libraries in Latin America than we have in Africa, than we have in Asia, then we have, of course, in the first world. How you confront these diverse realities of information literacy in the encyclopedia, and how you write about that the different ways that we, for example, talk about privacy in America, in the United States, and then how we talk about privacy in Africa or in Latin America.
Yeah, information literacy is a topic on the table today because of the emergence of the different applications of ICT. The digital world has brought us, or rather exposed us, into a new era of data mining, big data. Today, there is much talk about artificial intelligence, and also today, we talk more about digital resources as different from the hard copies that we used before. In my early days in the profession, if we needed to gain access to resources in the British Library, we will have to send, we will have to pay, and this will be copied and courier back. But today, you can see that all you need is to be literate enough to be able to go online. You need to be able to discover yourself. You need to be able to have the right search terms. You need to also know how to make use of the different gadgets that are coming up. I must say that there is a closing in the definition of literacy globally, because everyone now has to access the same resources. The packaging of these resources, when you talk about the large language models through artificial intelligence and like ChatGPT, is applicable across the globe. When you talk of digital literacy, it's the same thing in different parts of the world. And so these are realities. And whether from the global south or global north, it's imperative that everybody will now need to have this knowledge and our skills base deriving from the knowledge of not just the present, but the future. For instance, library, the organization of spaces in the library is fast giving way from sage to creative learning. So you don't have the librarian just there now. In the past, you have to walk in to go and visit a library, to knock, to go to the circulation. Most of these processes can be concluded online. The same thing in discovering. We used to have several ways of providing alerts for lecturers, but today every lecturer is able to do that. So you now find librarians having to study more on how to guide their patrons to discover resources and to, on their own back end, to be able to make these resources accessible in the language of the audience. And maybe that's probably where the difference is now. That okay, how fast are the different institutions from the global north and the global south having this understanding to be able to adapt to the changing dynamics of the information world. So the literacies will continue, and the exposure of the users of information may critically depend on the knowledge, the competencies of the librarian. And I see this also as a challenge to library school curriculum, that the curriculum in the library school must have to respond to all the changes that are futuristic, which are actually happening now. The change is so dynamic that it's even difficult to catch up, and that's what the library schools will have to do, so that the students that are going out, let's hope that before they even complete their studies, another change will not have come. But just to conclude on that is that yes, the future we are talking about all this is that we need to be prepared for change. And I think both the library school and the practitioners have to be very, very responsive. The tendency is for the practitioners to assume that everyone must still come to them. But we need to liberalize knowledge. There has to be a democratization, because now with interconnectivity, it is possible for everybody to go online. I don't have to travel to Mexico. I don't have to travel to Portugal or Spain or South Africa to access information. I can connect online. All I need to know is the process. And I think when we are now talking of literacy, we'll be talking about this literacy that enhances access to knowledge, that enhances discovery of knowledge in the language that the user will understand. So that's again the essence of my own section, because you need to study the population, the user, to know how literate they are in a particular aspect of the use of particular resources. Once you are able to identify that, then you can package it. But generally, the globe, that's the world itself, has only one language now, which is digitization. But the difference is how easily we are able to key into it to discover what is available, and also to package in such a way that it will be beneficial to all of us, to the user. I don't know whether that helps.
Yeah, that's it. I think we'll have a lot more questions, but I think you mentioned two topics that are very connected in the in the South global world. That is the decolonization and the information literacy, and it's not only about the language that you point that it's very important that you communicate in the same language. But when we talk about diversity, when we talk about decolonization, the history is written by the winners. So, and you mentioned that too. The first libraries in Africa were before the colonial world. So, how we rewrite the history and how we promote this new focus on the world, on the original world within our global south world, from the libraries. Do you know how to do that? How can we promote the original history of our people within this decolonization matter?
Yeah, thank you very much. The world is vastly interconnected today. So whether from the global north or the global south, we have to all work together. We have to use the technology developed in the global north to discover, to advocate, to make accessible what had been there in the global south, which appears to have been forgotten. It's not rewriting. Maybe we need to understand that we will not be rewriting, but that we need to accept that, well, this has been there. The question now is it still relevant? For instance, the manuscripts in St. Catherine's Monastery in Egypt, the Al-Khwarizm Library in Fez in Morocco, the earliest library. Are these manuscripts still relevant? I think they are for research. They are still relevant to be able to study the development of writing, the development of knowledge, more so that they are particularly in the Khwarizm University in Fez, Morocco. We had several scholars, Jewish scholars, Arabic scholars from North Africa, even from Europe, that came to study there. So, of recent, that particular library was rehabilitated. And the essence of the rehabilitation is to make accessible what has been there. And I think the transcript, the data, let's use the word data now, the data that is available in these pre-colonial libraries would be most useful for us, because it can be used to study the culture of the people. It can be used to study how the people communicated. It can be used to study how they developed knowledge and how they were able to communicate. And also, why was it that this type of knowledge did not easily transform into the digital age that we are? The good news is that they are being digitized, but the data that is available in those early libraries can actually help us, even in the matter of literacy that we have been talking about, because we discover that these people have actually been literate in a particular direction. But today, we are learning of literacies. We are learning of several literacies. So I think it's of interest if we are able to work together and know that, yes, the librarianship world is so dynamic and so inviting that there are many areas of research that we can go into when we are studying how man is responding to knowledge and how what they are doing with it. Because in it, we will be able to study the researcher, we will be able to study governments, we will be able to study policies, we will be able to study cultures. And in many of these early libraries, you have all this represented. So I think it will be quite of interest to be able to study the literacy as well as the stage of transformation, because those libraries are also being transformed. Many of the early libraries also were attached to monasteries. And so today we can now begin to study, okay, how relevant are those monasteries? How did they help to sustain society at the period that they were there? Of course, those in monasteries were well respected in society because they were very rare people. They were sages, so to say. Now, how effective was their knowledge in society? Did they translate their social status, their prestige into transformation of the society? Because I expect also that every knowledge sphere, every knowledge sphere becomes useful when it's able to have transformational impact in the consumer of that knowledge.
I think that's a very, very, very powerful conclusion. It's about how we libraries can transform communities, not only with information, but with information literacy. I know that you have a lot of questions. Sorry, because I'm with the sociological world with libraries, because I study in University of Antioquia, that is very social university. So I want to ask you that question, but let's go back to the encyclopedia. You have a lot of questions about that.
Yes, indeed. If you would like, I want to present on the screen your section, and let's take the opportunity so you can walk us through the topics and provide some comments. Would you like that?
Okay.
Let's put it on screen. Just remembering the audience that there's the website. We will put it now in the chat in a few moments, and we have to go to volume 4. And if I may say so, I'm a bit jealous of Stephen because his section is in a full volume and it's not divided in in different volumes as mine, that it begins at the end of one volume and it ends at the beginning of another one. So it's very compact in this way that it's presented in volume 4. But let's hear it from you, Stephen. Provide some comments on your section on whichever topics you would like, and if you want to share some of the experiences with the authors and all of that.
Thank you so very much, Juan. Of course, you provided the challenge because you are always there. We try to catch up with you, but that's okay. At least we are able to bring something out that is good. Now, in this section, we have um, 61 topics, and there are several that talk about the future, which includes literacy, artificial intelligence, medical practice, several. Now, on the future, we've talked sufficiently on literacies, and probably on that, I would like Juan to also speak maybe a word, make some input before I continue, because I like his chapter. He talks about several emerging literacies. In fact, not only that, he's also saying that there are other literacies that are coming that we should be prepared for. So probably I will want to ask that, okay, so what leads you to suppose that the literacies we are seeing are just the beginning?
I got myself into trouble, I think. So it was a challenge to write for your section, and to find like a very broad uh, way to present uh, possible future dealing with literacy, and not only information literacy. And I always want to distance myself from uh, technological determinism, because I don't particularly like to the idea that it is technology the only force that drives change.
Mm.
I think societies are much more complex than that.
Yeah.
Uh, it has a role, sort of like if we talk about the future of literacies, we have to acknowledge that the use of generative artificial intelligence uh, has brought forward the need to develop the so-called artificial intelligence literacy, or better yet, let's call it algorithmic literacy. And that is like a toolbox that keeps on expanding. But perhaps one issue is that we are seeing an overload of literacies. Uh, People are talking about information literacy, digital literacy, numerical literacy, statistical literacy, environmental literacy, and all of these kinds of literacies. Perhaps that's a bit too much. And curiously, when I was writing, doing the research to find uh, materials for writing the chapter, I found out that there's something called futures literacy. That is something like the skills that you can develop to analyze uh, your context and the and history to be better informed to make the best decisions about your own future, to sort of predict what is going on in the world, and so that you can make the best decisions that can benefit you better as an individual. And I found that very interesting. So that's what I wanted to provide, to highlight which were the key literacies from now on, and how we can sort of articulate them.
Thank you very much, um, Kwan. I was quite impressed when you
Thank
wrote
you.
that article, because I mean the chapter, I thought it encapsulated all we have been discovering about present literacy and the future literacy. Now, I want to also mention that we had articles on digital poverty, and this digital poverty has to do with how people, especially in the global south, are not able, for several factors, either of economy or part of this literacy, are not able to bridge that gap. So we have digital poverty and how it can be ameliorated. There is also the digital divide. Of course, earlier you were asking about the global north, the south, and we were talking around that. Obviously, there is some form of digital divide, but at the end, we are discovering that whether there is digital poverty or not, the ultimate today is the need for everybody around the globe to have a benchmark of literacy, of accessibility, in order to be able to communicate well with others, whether as researchers, as students, or as professionals, especially in information and library studies. We need to be able to have a minimum level of knowledge and skills, and also equipment or resources for us to be able to access information. Now, the section also talked about copyright and intellectual property, which today there is a debate whether we can actually ethically stop individuals from accessing information, what is right, what is not right, banning or censoring materials, acknowledging sources, and how to use, especially with the advent of social media, which is also discussed in this volume. Now, the matter of copyright, the matter of acknowledgement is very critical, especially in this digital age where people cut and paste, and it's now being complicated by the uses or non-uses of artificial intelligence. Now, the future that was written on artificial intelligence tried to trace the history of artificial intelligence and the appropriate uses, excuse me, the appropriate uses of artificial intelligence. Then we also mention race, gender, and other demographics in this section, because it has to do with libraries, information, and society. Of course, the users of knowledge, the users of the encyclopedia, they come from a wide range of races, gender, and other demographics. So this was well addressed in this particular chapter to be able to understand the constraints and the accessibility that they have, equal access to knowledge. This was discussed. And then governance and ethics. That also has to do with how the political institution, whether in the organization or in the national polity, affects ethics of information consumption. Now, when we talk of the ethics of information consumption, has to do with the generation, the distribution, which we call dissemination, and also the packaging of information. Now, we have several organizations that take care of the governance. We have library associations, we have information, Society of Information Scientists. This particular chapter looks at that. Then the matter of environmental impact and sustainability. Now, because of the digital age that we are in and the resources that we use, there is so much electronic waste that need to be recycled. And the center about this is the safety of the gadgets that we are using and the data in the gadgets. How do they affect the users and the environment? It affects the environment because the users of the information are the people living in the environment. And because they live in the environment, they need to stay healthy. Now, if we are going to destroy gadgets that have all sorts of batteries and other things, we need to be able to consider their lifespan the security, the health, the effects on health of the users. So this section, because it's dealing with society, needed to look at that. The same thing with environmental impact. So there is another topic on information science and sustainable development. That is how the study of information, the promotion of this knowledge can assist in sustainability of the development agenda of communities and nations. Of course, you know the United Nations development goals. Now, information science also has a big role to play. And so that was talking about that. And of course, politics. How does politics and the political actors, how do they affect information provision? That was also considered. Of course, politics has to do with rights of individuals overriding rights of others for particular advantages. Now, in providing information, why is it that some have more access than others? Why is it that access to information is more costly and more liberalized in different communities? Now, that politics, that chapter talks about that. Then we have decolonization, which we've also mentioned, information, digital divide, and decolonization in Africa. Now, this was written by a foremost historian, political economist, Tony Falola of the University of Texas. Now, his thesis is that, look, because of colonization, there is a digital divide. And because of that, necessary information is not coming forth. Therefore, there has to be a decolonization in order for the continent to be able to maximize the use of indigenous knowledge that can propel it to explore its full potentials on the global stage, not necessarily conforming to the doctrine of the North. That is a position, but again, it tries to disrupt the current thinking about the distribution of knowledge, the distribution of information and data. Now, we also have information ecosystems, learning and information ecosystem, which also tries to now talk about what are the different aspects of information that we need to take a look at if, as librarians, we are to properly manage information. Now, information and learning, they go together. If we are going to design a curriculum, we need to have a proper understanding of how to deliver this information, the knowledge we are gaining, of what use is it. For instance, if we import curriculum from the North, how relevant are the contents to the South that probably is not exposed to particular aspects of the curriculum? So we also need to know the ecosystem that we are in. We need to study the people, we need the geography, the culture, and to be able to advance learning without jeopardizing the exposure of the learner and the student. So this is one of the topics. Then, of course, librarianship in Africa. Librarianship in Africa, for me, I wrote that, and it was quite an interesting discovery. I will call it discovery, because, like I mentioned earlier, Africa has some of the world's oldest libraries. And another thing that I've discovered in that aspect is the role of women. The Khwarizm library, that is perhaps the oldest in the world, it was actually built by a lady. And the restoration that was carried out between 2012 and 2016 was also carried out by a lady. And the leadership of librarianship and information science in Africa in the last century is largely, and up to present, is largely the burden of women, which is quite Amazonic, if I will call it that way. We also have seen that librarianship in Africa has been propelled by a need to preserve knowledge and disseminate same amidst the challenges of colonization and promotion of indigenous knowledge. In that particular chapter, we discovered that library schools, especially regional library schools established by UNESCO with the cooperation of International Development Corporation in Canada, they contributed a lot in bringing about library schools that have been able to combine the newer knowledge, that's exposure to the West and also to the South. Now, it is very important to be able to acknowledge all this, because they have helped in shaping the practice of librarianship in Africa, and of course affecting the world itself. So we find that this is a very key aspect of the section. The other regional librarianship, like I said, is the Francophone, Anglophone Caribbean. Now, we talked about big data. Now, big data has become a normative today because there is so much aggregation of data, industrial data, intellectual data, economic data, political data, and even the bios, the data, the large data that we have for census, for individuals, our international passports and others. They are becoming a big challenge. The ethical uses of this data, how do we have access? What's the limit or the limitations to the use and access of use of this data and access to this data? How to what extent can we liberalize access to big data? What are the ethical considerations? Now, we thought that that is quite important, and so that was mentioned in the chapter. I think trends in library and information services under information society is another chapter that was well treated, and that chapter has to do with, okay, what are the present challenges? what is also the future. Interestingly, every chapter has a future section, but more importantly, they are also able to discuss the content. So when you talk about trends in library and information services, you talk about the AI, the use, you talk about the digital divide, you also talk about the uses, the accessibility to information, to data, and the changing uh, ways of packaging information and who is actually gaining more access than the other. I think largely this is a snapshot of the chapter, I mean, of the section. One couldn't go topic by topic, I mean, chapter by chapter, 61 chapters, but I think in order to just summarize, I hope that this also helps. Thank you.
Indeed, that's a great overview of your section, and we can see that topics are very, very important for connecting information libraries with society. Santiago, do you have a last question, perhaps?
Well, that a couple of comments because the this is a very special section that you have there, Stephen. So it reminds me a lot of people and a lot of things that we've been doing for years here in Latin America. For example, Natalia Duque, it's a professor from University of Antioquia that is proposing a information librarianship from the south. She called it Abi Ajala, like the original Goth in in our earth. But she called to make it from the decolonization, way of doing things. And one of the things that she told us a lot of things, a lot of times when she's doing a lecture, is that the women are forgotten in librarian work, even when they are most of the librarians in the world. So we have to do it. We have to do it better as men librarians here to make the recognizing of women in the librarian world. Another thing that you say that it's very important is that the future is now. The future is a daily construction, a daily building, and you can see that Harvard Libraries just a couple of days ago launched an initiative to make available all the data for trained AIs. We are right now training artificial intelligence with internet data that is not curated, that is not organized by professionals. So what librarians in Harvard Libraries do is, okay, we can make it better. We can make it in a way that the information is structured, the information is available in the good way. So we think that we have now to talk about that more in our countries, because if this initiative only came from the global north, we just have a lot of AIs trained with this vision, with this cultural and colonial or new colonial vision. But we have a lot of information in our libraries in the south. We have a lot of information in our communities that we can digitize in some ways, and we can put it to make it available for these new ways of communicate with others like AIs. So your section is like a call to all of us librarians, a call to make a different work in our library. So thanks for that, Stephen, and it's a beautiful work that you have there in the encyclopedia. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Indeed.
Yeah,
Go on.
I think that, sorry, Kwan, I think the beauty of the encyclopedia is the initiative of the general editors to have a diverse group of editors. from different perspectives, from different continents, to actually shape the discussion on librarianship. When you talk of production of knowledge, I see from the work in this encyclopedia that we now have input from different parts of the globe, and it provides a great diversification instead of one that you just pour the water down the pipe from one part of the globe. But now you have expression, you get to know the interpretation, the meaning of different concepts from different parts of the globe. And the good thing again is we have authors from all parts of the globe. Even in my own section, that is section 6, you have a diversity from Europe, from America, from South America, from Asia, from Africa. Everybody giving us diverse, and they are all fusing into one. And it is a major success of this particular encyclopedia that I would say. Thank you. Sorry, Kwan.
No, that's great, Stephen. And thanks for your time and for a great conversation. I think there are very good topics here that can lead us to very interesting reflections. But sadly, we are running out of time. So it's the moment when we make, as tradition of InfoTecarios Podcast this dictates, this is the time for the most difficult question. The most difficult question that we make do to our guests is, what are your hobbies?
My hobbies, I like to read Bible and to pray and to preach. I like sports, basketball. I play basketball. I played for my university. I played for my state. And yeah, I like reading. I like research. I like to study it. I like to find out new things. Um, yeah, yeah.
Nice.
That's great. Thank you very
That's
much.
nice. We have to make a basketball match. Latin America and Africa librarians in basketball match. Sometime.
That's right.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Thank you
Great.
very much, Stephen. It was great to have you there. It was great, and I have to say thanks for both of you, because I know that Juan made a great work there too. So thanks to make available this library and encyclopedia to all of us in the library world. And I think it's a call to read and to build a better future for us from the libraries. So thank you very much for both of you.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure
Thank
to
you.
have you, Santiago. Kwan, thank you so very much for the privilege to be able to share. And I thanks to our audience for this great time together.
So it's time to say goodbye, and thank you also to our audience, either if you followed this program live, or if you are watching or hearing the recording in any of the social media sites, podcast sites where we publish. We invite you to follow us next time, and also to visit Infotecarios in the various social media sites. Give us a like. Remember that we do this labor. This is a labor of love that we do for our profession, and especially for our students, wherever they are, whoever they are. We salute you, and we dedicate these programs to you. Remember, as our friend Tonio says, if you liked this episode, share it with a friend. If you didn't like it and you have an enemy, also share it with your enemy. Something good may come out of either way. We take this opportunity also to say hi to our colleagues, to Saul, who is not with us today as he's traveling again, to all other guys, to Tonio, to Martin, Merisanda. I hope I'm not forgetting someone, Alejandra also, and all the crazy guys from the InfoTecarios podcast and also the website. Remember, you can visit InfoTecarios also on the web. We have our blog, and that will be all. See you next time.
Thank you. See you next time for the same channel at the same hour next time. And thank you, Stephen, again. Thanks to all of you. Say hello from salutes from our students around the world, and have a nice, very nice Christmas, or because we will have a special end of the year episode in the next couple of weeks. So just connect to our social media and stand by for this special episode of the end of the year. So Stephen, hugs from Latin America. Juan, hugs from you from Colombia, and see you in next week.
Thanks. Same to you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.